presents 30 Minutes of Diabolical, Volume 2, Session 4.
How you feeling about this Witch House track out of Russia in your ears, Chuck?
Mystical, man. Good stuff.
It's pretty epic. And of course, if you're feeling epic, then you already know that this is your 30 Minutes of Diabolical, and welcome to it. In this session, Team Diabolical asks the insidious question, can early success damn you just when you hope to ascend?
It's true. Don't ask me how I know.
Next, we explore how sequels can undermine the very intrigue of The Matrix.
I'm looking at you, Attack of the Clones.
And finally, in a surprise twist, we bear witness to the signs of a director's downfall.
It's going to be a fun happening.
As always, we welcome you into the Diabolical Penthouse, where ponderous questions are posed, and electronic music is rapturous, as you can well hear. And of course, then there's the company, the aforementioned Chuck Rendon.
Yes, sir.
Chuck, how art thou?
You know, I'm doing great, man, and I have to say I am looking forward to this conversation. It's going to be fun.
It's going to be a wild one.
It is.
And I am a nocturnal human known as Curtis Harrod.
All right, well, I would say we have synchronization complete. Let's say we get started.
As we settle into our friendly confines, we all know that every podcast has an agenda, a plan for how it's going to entertain you or interest you. Chuck, 30 Minutes Diabolical, speak on it.
I don't think our plan's been written yet.
Still working on it.
But, you know, we like to invite people into our conversations around popular culture and whatever else is on our minds.
Very true.
And usually we're going to interject our razor wit.
It's as sharp as a Deathstroke blade, which is a little insight to some knowledge I'm about to talk about.
That's sharp, brother.
It is.
And we'll probably provide some amazing atmosphere. And we're going to immerse you in 30 minutes of diabolical, give or take.
You're not going to want to come up for air, really.
No, you're not.
Well, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention our third generous member in Team Diabolical, kind of our mascot, if you will. Chuck, would you be so kind as to introduce him?
Yes, sir. As always, we are joined by King Night Owl himself. And anytime you hear him speak up, you can rest assured some serious knowledge was dropped for you in this session's show notes. So stay tuned for that.
He is quite regal.
Yes.
Chuck, the dimmer switches have been activated. There's a nice, warm atmosphere in here. And that's completed by some very tasty beverages. What do you got?
All right, well, this evening, the folks from Eel River Brewing Company are up in the Diabolical Penthouse.
Hello.
As I'm enjoying a glass of their Raven's Eye Imperial Stout. This is 9.5% alcohol by volume, so things are going to get interesting.
I was just about to mention the label on that brew. You mentioned a strong alcohol. That might be the strongest artwork I've seen on a brew. It's
impressive. You know, and when I first heard Raven's Eye, of course, my mind went right to Edgar Allan Poe, which, you know, I'm a huge fan. So
sure.
But so far, I'm loving the beer. It has a hint of espresso and dark chocolate.
Oh, so nobody's sleeping tonight.
I feel it's a perfect accompaniment to this late evening.
Where's this brew stationed out of?
They're located in Fortuna, California, so not too far from the penthouse.
Yeah, as the raven flies, if you will.
There you go. So another local brew that, so far, thumbs up on my account. I'm curious, though, what are you drinking?
This might turn into a very mini rant, and I apologize ahead of time.
Oh, it's going to be exciting.
I am enjoying some Arizona green tea with ginseng. Felt like I needed to bolster my antibodies. I've had a long weekend, as many have. But I gotta say, I am astonished that I cannot find peace tea anywhere in this city.
Yeah, I've noticed you have not brought Bay in here for quite some time.
Well, if Bay doesn't text back, then...
She's plain hard to get.
I don't understand. Guys, at Peace Tea, if this finds you in some Byzantine twisting electricity maze and it ends up in your ear, what's going on? You guys are like 50 miles away. I cannot find the product. This is Arizona tea. Let's just say they're out of Arizona. I can't find peace tea, man. It's upsetting.
Oh, man. Well, I have to say, though, Arizona green tea with the ginseng, I lived off that stuff in college. So
As well you should.
Great stuff, man.
It is refreshing.
Couple of great beverages. Cheers, brother.
Cheers. Well, we have a trifecta of directors on our minds that have really been kind of in focus this week. Well, two of them have been in focus, just dropped a movie. But before that, I know you have some dope on your mind, and we may as well, if we're talking dope, we may as well listen to some dope. Sizzlebird. Let's get Sizzlebird up in here. What do you say?
That seems appropriate to me. And, you know, my dope this week, I'm actually going to give a shout out to a friend of our show. We've mentioned it before in the Penthouse, but he's our brother from the north, Eric Terrio.
Hello.
This cat shared with me his YouTube video channel.
Oh, yes.
And I have to say, it was a very entertaining afternoon I spent with Mr. Terrio on YouTube. This cat has a fun brain. We'll leave it at that. He's put out a couple fun videos with his friends. My favorite, though, there's the Johnny Thunder specials.
Okay, what actor came to mind when you were watching him run around out in the woods or whatever?
Well, the guy I first thought of was MacGruber. He had that nice mullet with the flannel shirt. So.
I hope he's still rocking the mullet, really.
Right. But good stuff. Pretty epic, man. And there was also, he did a Spanish soap opera.
No.
Yes, it's called Paradiso del Fuego. And I have to say, as entertaining as Johnny Thunder was, this is probably the tops for me. It's pretty darn entertaining.
I followed the link to the sniper video he had where he was chasing that car around the countryside.
Nice, right?
That was pretty wild. Yes. I'm not going to lie. He does have quite the brain on him now.
Well, he took me back to the 80s, which you know already. My brain's going to love that. Never. So shout out to Mr. Terrio. I enjoyed your fun films. I look forward to more. Cheers, brother.
Nicely done.
You're dope, sir.
Well, I borrowed a game from you last week. A game which I did not play at release because I had heard spotty things about it.
Okay. You were wise to do so.
Arkham Origins, the third game in the Arkham trilogy. The first two games made by Rocksteady are rock solid, obviously.
Right.
This next one made by Warner Brothers Montreal and Splash Damage, which I'm not really familiar with their work.
No, this is first I've heard of Splash Damage. I was familiar with the Warner Brothers Online.
I want to give them a tip of the cap because early on the game, it takes a little to getting used to. The buttons aren't nearly as responsive at times.
Right.
But the first real boss battle with Deathstroke, cinematically speaking, that was a treat, was it not?
Yes. I have a funny aside for that because I bought the game when it first was released. So glitchy is putting it lightly.
That's what I heard.
That scene, I went in and right after the cutscene, Deathstroke became this rag doll that I basically could just throw around. He wouldn't move, and literally I could not kill him, and the scene would not end. So I literally had to restart my system. So that was fun.
Was he still trash talking while he was rag?
He was.
Yes.
But he literally wasn't moving, and I could just sit there and pound on him all day long.
I really enjoyed the nuance of the fight. When he first enters the arena, he has his sword out. He puts his sword back, takes out the staff, and then you know it's a couple layer fight, as many boss battles are. But I just really enjoyed the cinematics. You know, the smoke bomb, and then he comes at you at a different direction.
Good call.
Really enjoyed the boss fight. Looking forward to what lies ahead.
Well, and you have to give it up to Warner Brothers Online because it's a tough act to follow Rocksteady because those two games were really solid. So
for my money, you'll never beat Rocksteady's hand-to-hand combat system.
No, agreed. It's a fluid system, and you know, I will say though, I know you're not done with the game yet, so we won't get too into it, but it's a fun story.
Well, let me ask you this: is that the best boss battle?
You know, I wouldn't expect myself to say this, but I will agree with that. It is to me. It was fun, and maybe I'm a little partial because I do love the character of Deathstroke.
He's definitely, his stock is up.
Yeah.
Well, was it because of how he looked? Do you feel like Deathstroke is kind of the Boba Fett of the DC universe, at least for now?
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate. You know, he certainly has that look down, and he has an array of weaponry.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, he's a badass. He has a presence.
He's dope, man.
There you go. Totally dope, man. Love it.
I started kind of blowing you up midweek because I had seen a movie called Jupiter Ascending. You had not seen it. You have not seen it.
I still have not seen it, no.
But you don't need to for this conversation. Just because this has been a brutal month for cinema. As we all know, there was a certain movie that dropped at Valentine's Day. Something about something gray.
Let's not speak
We're not
on
going
that.
there. We're not going there. But Jupiter Ascending, a sci-fi film, big budget, came from the Wachowski family. I want to put the emphasis on family, or siblings, rather.
The Wachowskis, as they're going officially right now, yeah.
Okay, that works. The movie was pretty horrid. There's a couple positive things I could say about it, but only a couple. We'll leave it at that. I don't want to discuss the film. But what is curious is kind of the rise and the success of this directing team and how they've really been unable to recapture that.
Well, I think it's funny that you frame it that way, too, because I have to be honest, I haven't seen Jupiter Ascending yet. And honestly, when I found out that the Wachowskis were behind it, that didn't really increase my intensity to want to watch it much. In fact, I figured going into it, it would be kind of convoluted maybe and great visually, but maybe not so great story-wise.
Well, maybe over the span of a year, you get a handful of sci-fi films that are push visuals.
Sure.
This is probably the first one for 2015.
Yeah.
And it was kind of sold on that it was going to show you some amazing things.
And it's weird too, though, because I've watched the trailer a couple times.
Okay.
And I have to say, like, while the colors were dynamic and everything,
Guilty.
It felt kind of cheap to me. I don't know. And maybe it was just because Channing Tatum kind of took me out of it because the dude's wearing like some eyeliner and...
Yeah, and the explanation for his character, somewhat cool. At the end of the day, his appearance does undermine that.
Yeah, so visually, I'm already kind of at a loss. You took me out before I even watched the film, so to speak.
You mentioned the name, the Wachowskis. Am I saying that name correctly? It's a tough name.
Sounds right to me.
The name on the project. Now, we've seen like actors can turn you off to a movie. But directors, how often does that come up where you're like, I should like this movie, but the directing team or the director is going to taint that?
Yeah, well, for me, it doesn't come up negatively too often. Usually it's a positive for me because
Right.
I'll recognize the director's work and I'm like, okay, I'm going to give this film a chance because of the track record. But yeah, I think the Wachowskis are interesting because their last couple films that I've watched really didn't do much for me.
Do you feel like that they're getting too ambitious with their maybe social commentary in their movies? Like it's a little too elusive, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And this just ties into the story. I think, their last couple of films, the story just gets very convoluted for my taste. And I
Right.
think the average audience member just isn't really going to follow.
I'm also finding it a little curious how maybe even the trailers before a film can maybe kind of knock you out of balance right before you watch it. The new movie that's going to be dropped by Blomkamp, Chappie,
right.
with those practical effects, everything looks real and gritty. And then you kind of go into Jupiter Ascending, where things are exceptionally colorful. Kind of like earlier Wachowski projects. Speed Racer comes to mind, which many thought was an acid trip on wheels for the most part.
I wish I had some acid when I was watching it.
Well, that would have, it may have broken your brain.
I think my brain got broken anyway, but
I want to watch that movie again just to see if it was as bad as it was.
I think they tried to literally bring anime into live action format.
Okay,
and
right.
I think we figured out maybe that doesn't necessarily work.
It worked with The Matrix, but we'll visit that in a second.
Well, The Matrix, yeah. Well, I think Speed Racer, though, was that kind of cartoonish anime they were trying to bring, and I didn't think that translated well to live action.
Okay, here's a question. Could be a landmine, but I want to throw out a qualifier that, of course, we're fans of the LGBT community. Do you think that the Wachowski gender transformation has anything to do with the success of the films? Public perception, anything? Just what do you think?
Well, I would be naive to say that it didn't affect in some fashion. I'm sure that alone, turned some people away, just, people who are completely against that. There are certain subsect of the population out there.
Nicely done.
Who would feel that way. In the grand scheme, though, I don't think it really matters too much. I think you get lost in the film. So a good story, you're not really going to be thinking about who created the film.
Fair enough. I concur with that for the most part. I think that the quote-unquote flyover states may have some aversion to maybe supporting certain lifestyles.
I would also argue, though, that you take like The Matrix, for example, and that really kind of tied into that cyberpunk sort of new wave movement, I guess.
Right.
In many respects, I would almost assume that the transgender thing might have bolstered that, because that's something that community could get behind,
Very true. I don't want to make this conversation about that, but I do think it's relevant because he is the only transgender director out there. And I do think that them being reclusive, as they've been described in articles and stuff like that people have questions.
Well, we won't spend any more time on this, but at the end of the day, I really don't think the transgender thing correlated to poor box office or poor reception too much.
Okay, so the jump off of this conversation was early success and how it may taint pretty much everything else you're involved in later. The Matrix was not the Wachowskis' first film. I believe it was Bound, which was a semi-erotic thriller. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it sounds right. It wasn't really memorable. I don't know too many people would necessarily.
People have hung cult on it from time to time just because of the actors involved.
Right.
But The Matrix was a film that you almost walked right back in the theater after it ended because your mind was blown.
No, absolutely. And, The Matrix released in 1999, and a lot of people were dubbing it sort of the updated Star Wars franchise.
They did. And let me ask this. I'm curious. Do you remember exactly the theater that you walked out of when you saw The Matrix? Do you remember that day?
I do, yeah.
As do I. I remember I was back in Olathe, Kansas at the 30-plex.
Nice.
And we walked out of that theater and we were like, what just happened to our eyeballs?
No, absolutely. And I saw it in Long Beach. Visually, it was dynamic. It started off very, you thought, okay, we kind of have this rebel hacker, whatever, kind of seen that before. And then,
well, that was a new kind of, people were not familiar with hackers. The general public wasn't at that time.
Yeah. I mean, we've had there was a couple other films around that time that sort of dabbled in hackers, but
hackers.
There you go.
Angelina Jolie.
But, oh gosh.
I've not forgotten.
You're going to get me on a tangent, brother.
Sorry about that. Spandex. It's a privilege, not a right.
Brother, the images,
now we're going to have a diabolical conversation about hackers.
Oh, gosh.
Sorry about that.
Anyway, from the moment that the Morpheus character was introduced, yeah, I mean, the red pill, blue pill scenario, I was hooked. It was an intriguing storyline, one that when you really digested where the culture was at that time, everybody was starting to get jacked into the internet at that point.
Indeed.
So it was very believable that, this virtual world could be something that...
Well, and as the acts went on in that movie, dude, the third act reveal, you almost pooped your pants.
Yeah.
You're like, am I a battery right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those great films that it gets you to question your very existence. Are we in the Matrix right now? Is it,
And that movie closed on a scene where Neo kind of powers up and leaps into the sky.
Right.
And you're like, all right, great ending,
Absolutely.
At that time, my brain didn't think like it does now. We just watched John Wick. We talked about it a couple months ago. And we were like, please no sequel. It carries more weight if it doesn't.
Right.
They've just since announced a sequel to John Wick.
Ah, yes.
But the sequel to The Matrix started to shake people. Why do you think it did?
Well, I think it was twofold. Number one is the original Matrix was so beloved that people really didn't want to tarnish that experience.
A sequel kind of takes the punch out.
It does. It does, absolutely. And the way the original ended, you're almost like, well, where can a sequel possibly take us? We already have Neo who's sort of become master of the Matrix.
Right.
Where do you go from there?
Well, where we go from there was the Burly Brawl, right, which was the first thing that it was amazing to look at, but also people were like, uh-oh, we're getting really heavy into CGI.
Yes. And I think that was the point, where it was, they started relying heavily on the CGI stuff, but also the story started getting a little...
It did. You had French
sparse.
people kind of making sexual innuendo with pie, etc. And that leads us to the third Matrix, which by halfway point through that movie, you were looking for the exit. I mean, that's just honesty.
From a business standpoint, obviously it made sense to greenlight these sequels because, the first Matrix film did huge business. The second one did even bigger business. And then the third one, not as great.
Well, sometimes it's strange to me that, let's just take a video game platform for this analogy. You can make a series like Gears of War, wildly successful, embraced, but you almost get overexposed to that world. And they keep throwing things at you. Is that the case with The Matrix, in your opinion?
It's funny that you bring overexposed up because, as you recall, the last two films, Reloaded and Revolutions, released in the same year of each other.
That's right.
They were filmed back to back. One was released in the summer, one was released in the fall, as I recall. So it's intriguing. You already kind of left Reloaded with a little bad taste in your mouth, followed up immediately by Revelation. So were you kind of matrixed out at that point?
Well, and let that be a lesson to any Tron sequels. God forbid we have a Tron movie where people are in the real world. Don't let that happen. Do not let that happen.
Just let's retcon the ending to Legacy.
So The Matrix has been pushed aside. It's probably looking at a reboot at some point.
It's inevitable, I'm sure. But their follow-up to that was Speed Racer. And, we briefly already touched on that. Visually,
Visually, it seemed like a dare.
It was. And I think it was a dare that didn't necessarily work. There were times when I was watching it where I almost felt a little dizzy, to be honest.
Sure.
There was almost too much going on in the film. I applauded their ambition to try to correlate anime to live action.
Well, these guys are not short on ideas. I mean, you look at their resume. Right. They've written comics. God knows how many scenes they've storyboarded.
Yeah. But again, I think it comes back to story, and the story behind Speed Racer, it was pretty formulaic.
Okay.
And so you didn't really have anything to back up the visuals. So if you're already kind of falling out on the visuals a little bit and then the story doesn't take you, then you're done.
And let me throw a layered question at you. I kind of hinted at it before we stepped behind the mics, but sci-fi movies are hard to follow up on occasion.
Right.
Can you give me a sci-fi franchise that you enjoyed the first sequel or just the first movie, and down the line you saw where a director started to go wrong and it started to shake you? It's a general question. What do you got?
Well, the obvious bait in this one is Star Wars, but I actually have another one.
All right.
And I'm going to go to the Aliens franchise.
Nicely done.
The first two, pretty dynamic. The second one actually upped the ante, and I thought it was even better than the first.
But you had Bill Paxton. Game over, man.
There you go. But then you had Alien 3 and whatever other ones followed up that. Alien 3 lost me. You had Sigourney Weaver's character impregnated by...
Well, the Aliens franchise is always trying to push the gross kind of edge.
Right.
The envelope.
So they lost me. And I know Ridley Scott, I don't believe he was involved with the later incarnations, but two nearly perfect films to start with, and then it just goes to the crapshoot after that. But same question to you, though. I'm curious.
Well, if you're going Aliens, I'm going to take that Star Wars bait.
You're going to take the bait. Nice.
Return of the Jedi, young Cujo saw Boba Fett take a header. That was not a good scene. Even as a child.
Talk about, though, one of the most ominous characters in the Star Wars universe. What a sad way for that guy to go out on screen.
And even in the special editions, he misses with a point-blank laser shot while Luke is not even looking at him. All right, enough of that nonsense.
Nice.
So before we wrap this conversation, the Wachowski siblings, what do you make of their outings? They started out white hot. Now they're probably not even going to be on the marquee the next film they make.
Yeah. That's kind of an allusion to our next conversation.
It is.
Yeah, I almost say, we talked about early success maybe getting in the way of your future, and I think this is a classic example. Matrix was so successful, I think it just opened them up to thinking maybe they could do no wrong, or,
Do you feel like it smells of the Lucas success where after, obviously the early success of Star Wars, he's just surrounded by yes men that don't edit his work or anything?
That could be it too. You can't deny the fact that since The Matrix, they've certainly been on a downward spiral. And Jupiter Ascending, I have not seen it yet,
Ironic.
but There you go. It's opening day at the box office. Not too pretty. As, SpongeBob SquarePants movie was number 1. Jupiter Ascending, though, didn't even beat out American Sniper, which was in its 7th week of release.
Yeah.
$18 million opening weekend. Not a great start for a film that they were trying to make a big budget sci-fi.
3D IMAX.
Right. So it'll be intriguing to see how they rebound or what their next film is, or if they're even mentioned in their next film.
Well, there's been rumors of them taking a break since they've been on for so long. We'll see.
Probably not a bad idea.
Interludes, Chuck. How's the Raven's Eye treating you?
I gotta say, man, I'm more than halfway done with the bottle. It's doing good. Anytime you can give me dark chocolate and coffee mixed together, I'm gonna have a good time, man. And that 9.5%, I'm feeling it.
I can see it in your eyes, man. It's looking good.
They're twinkling, right?
Word.
How's Arizona treating you, though?
The ginseng blossoms are dancing in my head. It works. It's good.
There you go. All is right with the world.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take an interlude with a track from a Valentine's mix that was just dropped. A track called Heart Eyes, if you will. When we return, we'll be discussing yet one more director that has had a mysterious downfall. Join us. Track, Heart Eyes. Are you feeling it?
Got my heart racing, man.
It's by an artist who's actually changing his name right now. So when he does have a name, we'll definitely drop it on you guys.
Nice.
It's a sweet track. And that brings us to our next director, who started out like wildfire and ever since then has been questioned by nearly everybody that sits down to watch his films.
This is when you first threw up the topic to me about directors who started successfully and then trail off from there. This was the guy I immediately thought of. I think, how could you not?
Well,
really?
It starts with his name because it almost feels arrogant, doesn't it? For the subject matter that he covers.
Yeah. Of course, if anyone hasn't figured out, we're talking about M. Night Shyamalan.
I don't know why we're laughing at his name.
He who must not be named, I guess, is how he's officially seen in Hollywood now.
Well, you said that kind of throwaway, but that's actually the case with his last movie, is it not?
Yeah, it was the Will Smith After Earth, which was intriguing because trailer, his name was not mentioned at all. Movie posters, no mention again. You would not know that this was an M. Night Shyamalan film. His
first movie, The Sixth Sense, critically as well as the audience really loved that movie.
Yeah, I mean, it made a breakout star of Haley Joel Osment, as a little kid.
Which is yet another conversation.
But yeah, it was a great film. It's very suspenseful, and if you didn't know the twist going into it, it was a pleasant surprise.
In shows on Adult Swim like Robot Chicken have roasted M. Night Shyamalan for all the twists that he does. You've seen those
Yes.
Things.
We'll probably talk about this a little more in depth here in a bit, but I really think he became a slave to the twist ending, which was really part of his downfall.
Well, after he dropped a couple movies, people started kind of like noticing a lot of similarities to Twilight Zone scripts and stuff.
It's a good call, yeah.
Like he had just maybe kind of changed the window dressing on a lot of very similar plot lines.
Right. Which that became very apparent, in the Village, which was an obvious Twilight Zone rip.
It's hard to pinpoint M. Night's downfall, really. Signs, it was kind of good. It had moments.
It had moments. I think, there was like the first reveal of the alien was...
Yeah, it's cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Really, I really pinpoint the fall of M. Night to really start with The Village. I think that was the one, critically at least, that he started getting pandered on. That's where the whole idea of him being beholden to the twist ending, where
True.
It was sacrificing the story at that point. And then you had the follow-up Lady in the Water, which,
Well, all of his movies have some good actors in them.
Right.
I'm kind of wondering, do you think his cameos in his films are a little self-serving? Do you think it pulls people out of the plot when he shows up? I mean, he's not the strongest actor.
Right. Possibly. I mean, honestly, I think the first couple cameos, people might not even know who he was or that was him.
Fair enough.
I don't know whether he was trying to go the Stan Lee route and create sort of this persona.
You have to think that, though.
But Stan Lee, he is not. And I think over time, maybe that did hurt him. I'm not sure. But I really point to the fact that, again, as we stated with the Wachowskis, it ties into the story. And I think his first couple films, The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable, were two really well-written screenplays. From start to finish, those were good films.
Unbreakable, nobody has anything bad to say about.
No, not at all.
Really.
I mean, I really, still to this day, it's one of the more intriguing superhero origin stories, I think.
Very true.
That you'll find.
Mr. Glass.
Yeah.
Well, this kind of brings up another question for me. A lot of his early movies have kind of an indie feel. The budget's not massive.
Right.
And then, one of his later films is The Last Airbender, a cartoon which people love. Do you feel like he was in over his head with the special effects? Is that another nail in the coffin, or what are we talking about here?
The Last Airbender was intriguing because his film just before that was The Happening.
Oh, geez.
Which, right. I mean, when the wind is like your villain, you're in trouble.
It's hard to make plants look vicious.
Right.
It just is.
So again, the twist ending didn't serve it. But The Last Airbender, was kind of his attempt to break that genre, what he was known for, and really give this sort of sci-fi action film. But I think at this point, the damage was done. Like when people found out it was an M. Night movie, I think that sort of hurt its critical appeal, certainly. But again, it just, a lot of people, even fans of that franchise, didn't like the film.
Let's take a look into the Diabolical crystal ball for a second. Out of the Wachowskis and the Shyamalan, who is more likely to come back?
I would have to lean towards the Wachowskis. At the end of the day, even their, Jupiter's sending out of it, but even their, critically panned films still did okay at the box office. They other than Speed Racer, they didn't really have any film that didn't make money. M. Night, it's a tough thing. I mean, it's gotten to the point where, his name's not even attached to the film anymore.
Well, it's not on the movie poster or anything like that. Yeah.
That says something, and the fact is that name, I think at this point it just sours people. They're expecting not a good film.
It's also been quite a long time since he's dropped a good movie. So his name it's been a while.
Yeah. I mean, you could argue that Signs was really his last good film, and that was 2002. So it's been a minute.
And for our final trivia question for early success gone awry.
Nice.
Let me turn that around on you. A movie that was incredible, that did not deserve a sequel, did not need a sequel, but the sequel is actually pretty good. You got anything that comes to mind?
I'm going to go to my animation roots here, and I'm going to bring up the Toy Story franchise.
Oh, nice.
First Toy Story was awesome, and it was a film that you thought, okay, this did not need a sequel. We got it. Second one dropped. I was bemoaning it before I saw it. Like, this film does not need a sequel. Sequel turned out to be better than the original. And I would even argue the third one was even better than that.
It's only getting stronger, dude.
Yeah. So that's a case where, hey, I was proven wrong and I loved it because they continue that story in such a great manner that was awesome. So that's clearly my franchise.
I like it.
What about you, though? Who do you got?
Well, I kind of use this question as an excuse to bring in one Stanley Kubrick.
Oh, nice. Prior agenda, I love it.
2001, Space Odyssey, a movie which still confounds people and inspires this current generation of filmmakers.
Yeah, absolutely.
2010, the sequel. Didn't need it, no place for it, but it actually took an interesting look at Russia relations with the U.S. during the Cold War. You have, two different nations working together in space while back on Earth. Yeah. The countries are at war.
That's a good call. It's funny, too, because I know Stanley Kubrick was not very happy that they were planning to make a sequel. And I know he wrote, I can't remember if it was the director or the production company, but he wrote an actual letter to them saying, hey, I know I can't legally stop you, but if you go forward with this film, you will incur the wrath of Stanley Kubrick.
Well, someday, some very special day, we'll have a conversation about 2001. I think we can both agree that is a movie among movies.
Oh man, start to finish, your mind is just constantly in a state of flux through that whole thing,
and also the time when it dropped, people, even now it's amazing to look at.
Yeah,
people
absolutely.
Back then were astonished.
Well, it was just a great pairing of visual with musical score, and just every single minute of that film was crafted just brilliantly. Can't say anything else.
That is the perfect usage of that word.
Kudos to you, brother, by bringing Kubrick into this conversation.
We had to bring him back.
I love it anytime that happens.
Horseman makes an appearance.
Nice.
Chuck, hot starts, and then people cool off. It's a tough road.
It is, man. I mean, can there be redemption? Never say never.
People love a comeback story.
Absolutely. So, Wachowskis, they can totally do it. M. Night, it's going to be a little tougher because that guy has a lot of ground to cover. And I think, you mentioned the Wachowskis are thinking of taking some time off. I think that would behoove M. Night as well. I think if he went away for a bit, came back maybe in a couple years with something completely different, I think that might be a chance for him to
he should not try and star Mark Wahlberg for any other movies either. That would be a mistake. I will say that the Wachowskis, there's always a rumor that they're attached to the Metal Gear Solid movie franchise if it ever drops.
Yeah.
So if that gets made, those guys are pretty much perfect for that franchise.
Yeah. Hopefully they don't go the Speed Racer route and literally try to give us a video game on screen, but
turn it to an acid trip with Snake.
But you never know, man. We'll see.
I don't mean to be negative. I've had my fill of M. Night. I've seen his bag of tricks. I get it.
Well, he's got the Visit coming out later this year, I believe.
That synopsis did not exactly blow my hair back.
Well, the only thing that's been released about it, we haven't seen a teaser or anything for it, but it's basically like this mother finds that her family life goes awry after her kids visited their grandparents. So
maybe it was a woman in the lake or something. Who knows?
Oh, gosh. Well, M. Night would be wise not to go anywhere near lakes or water anymore.
I'll give you my attention one more time, M. Night. Let's hope you bring some good game. Chuck, yet another diabolical session in the books. What's your takeaway from the night?
I have to give it up to you, actually, man. You found a way to bring Kubrick into this conversation with 2001. I loved it, man. Anytime we can bring Kubrick into the Penthouse, I'm going to love it. So
nice.
Kudos to you, sir. Your takeaway.
Well, when we were reading up on the Wachowskis, I did not realize that they adapted the V for Vendetta script.
That's right. We didn't really talk too much about that, but that was intriguing, and
they came up with a lot of V words for that script.
But
it's impressive.
It was a great adaptation. I mean, tough act to try to adapt an Alan Moore, piece of fiction, but they did a good job.
Did it right. So, Twitter, right, Chuck?
That sounds right, man.
I'm at 86 Cujo. Feel free to tweet me about anything. Randomness. I'm down for that. Chuck, please drop some personal knowledge.
Well, you can find me at Romba on Twitter. So night or day, you can always float your conversations to me. You know that.
The more the merrier.
So I'm intrigued by your M. Night comments or your Wachowski comments.
Yeah, I
mean,
sure
they'll be
both
quite
these
spirited.
directors, very interesting.
Yeah. And if you enjoyed what you heard this session, and why wouldn't you really? You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, as well as other platforms at this point.
Various platforms. Let me drop something that's long overdue. If you're on iTunes, drop us a review. I don't honestly care what the review is, but yeah, give us a couple minutes. We would very much appreciate that.
We would love your feedback. So yeah, absolutely. That'd be a great thing. And for all those hoots you heard from King Night Owl, make your way over to diabolical30.com under Volume 2, Session 4.
Hello.
You'll find those show notes, read them, level up.
Chuck, would you please elevate the talent?
It would be my honor, sir. You know, we started things off with Wasted Future and their song Space is Waiting. I know we've used him before in the Penthouse.
Yeah, he made a cameo during our Tron session when we were talking about Russian art.
Yeah, good call. And ironically enough, he is from Russia, so it all comes together, but great track. Loved it.
A rising artist there.
And next we went on an interlude with the artist formerly named Yonderer. I know he's in the process of changing his name.
That's a tricky thing to do, change your name.
It is more power to him, but Hard Eyes, loved it. Great song.
That was pretty awesome.
It was. And of course, we're currently decompressing with Waxstag, who is a fan of vinyl music, which I find very refreshing.
And unknown whereabouts. So if you hear our voices, let us know where you're at.
Always ominous.
We'd love to know.
Yeah, but Waxtag, Rob Lee, we hear you, man. Great stuff. And now we have to rep our Diabolical cover art for this session. What do you got for us?
Well, we wanted to find some Matrix-y looking art, and Michael Rigby from Canada showed us just that with a very stylized picture of kind of a Matrix type person. Chuck, are you feeling this art?
You know I am. I've told you this, but it really reminds me of the main character in Captain EO, the Disneyland attraction. So
that's a Southern California drop right
brought
there.
some nostalgia there. So great job.
Nice.
Love the artwork. I think on that, we are officially done here in the Penthouse. What a fun conversation. I have to give it up to Eel River Brewing and their Raven's Eye.
Got you, man.
Certainly did it for me. The 9.5% was my perfect number. I loved it. Great glass of beer. So cheers to them. Great stuff.
Indeed. And cheers to Arizona. And thank you for everybody who joined us.
Absolutely. We will catch you here in the Penthouse next week. Take care. Hi.
I got nothing.